Hi, everyone. Welcome to MEDENT Minutes, the podcast that explores EHR optimization and how practices can excel in value-based care. I'm Megan Chapman, the Director of Marketing and Communications here at MEDENT. And today we are doing some spring cleaning with MEDENT, and our trainer Karen Valent is going to talk to us a little bit about some of the areas of MEDENT that we should be regularly checking and updating and reviewing as part of our spring cleaning here. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, we Karen actually put together a wonderful presentation for some clients of ours about some spring cleaning, and I loved it so much. I said we have to do a podcast on this, and just start talking about some of these things that clients should be reviewing. So, can you just talk a little bit about why it's so important to kind of tidy up your EHR system on a regular basis?
Absolutely. There are so many areas in MEDENT where we have our master files and where staff has items that they're reviewing on a regular basis that we kind of just forget about as we go through day to day. And it's important once in a while or occasionally, whether you do it once a year, quarterly, to kind of look at those areas and say, do I really need all of this? Is it all pertinent? Do I want to clean up my system to kind of tidy things up, close things up, and keep track of what's important as opposed to having all that extra clutter? So I made a list of things that we can review that will hopefully help you think of those things. Providers, for instance. You want to look at your provider. Are those providers still all active in your system? So people forget to deactivate providers when they leave. So it's important to take a look at those things throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you did such a great job of kind of organizing these things into a nice list. And I do want to point out that we are actually working on making this presentation into an ebook that, like a guide that people will be able to download. So as far as specific instructions on things like how to do, deactivate providers and the actual how, I will refer everybody here listening to the podcast to this ebook guide that should be coming out soon, as well as some new quick clips and tutorials that are going to be coming to our website. So as far as the how goes, we're not really going to get into the how here on the podcast. It's more helpful for folks, I think, to see the how. But we're going to just kind of go through this list and talk about the why and what you should be looking at. So Karen, I thought we could just dive into it. Are there certain areas in the practice management area of MEDENT that we should be reviewing on a regular basis?
Yes, there are several. So one of the first things that I like to review again is the doctor master file. So that's the list of providers that are in your practice. And it's important to make sure that you look over that list. Are these providers all still active in the system? And if they're no longer with your practice, then you can submit a form to MEDENT support to request to have that provider deactivated. You can still run reports if a provider is deactivated. Some fun facts about the provider master file are rather that we have some enhancements in which you can assign tags to providers now. These tags are something that you would customize and name. You can assign it to a provider. So when you're looking at your provider master file list, you can easily identify, for instance, residents. So if you have any residents that see patients in your practice, you can add a tag to them. So when you're looking down your list, you can easily identify. Some people will use them if a doctor is new to your practice and isn't fully credentialed yet. So they might create a flag so you can easily see which doctors aren't fully credentialed. Another thing that we have with doctors you may not be aware of is you can create doctor groups and assign providers to one or more doctor group. groups. That way, when you run reports, you can choose a specific group as opposed to selecting the same 4 doctors all the time when you're running reports. So it's important to look at those active providers, make sure all those providers are still in your practice. You can submit a deactivation form request to MEDENT support. And even if that provider is deactivated, you can still enter charges for that provider as long as it's prior to that deactivation date.
Great, yeah. And as far as those tags go, there's a color customization that goes with that as well. So those tags, in addition to tags being available with the doctor specialty, we have tagging capabilities now throughout our system. You'll see tags popping up with like triage messages, to-do lists, and these doctor specialty tags. And I, for one, love using the tags in our system because it is such a nice way to quickly see, I'll set a certain color, means something. And then I'll see that color tag pop up and know, oh, this is, a new provider, like you said, that's not credentialed. It's just such a nice way to quickly see and summarize these specialties. So I personally love the tagging features that we've started to implement here.
They are wonderful.
Yeah. So as far as and that goes for active providers and referring providers too, right?
Yes, I believe you can add tags to referring providers. The other thing with referring providers, as we start talking about that, it's important to look at your referring doctor master file occasionally, and you can run it to an Excel spreadsheet so it's easier to view all the information. But you want to make sure that those providers are still active in your area and deactivate any providers that are no longer practicing in your area, or maybe they've retired. Make sure their information is up to date. And a newer feature within MEDENT is now you can create ACOs within MEDENT, and you can name that ACO, color coordinate that ACO, and attach referring doctors to that ACO. And that way, when your staff is looking for a provider to refer a patient to, they will see a little ACO icon next to their name. So it helps them quickly identify, hey, these are the preferred providers that we want to refer to. So referring doctors is another very important area to make sure that you have the up-to-date information on. So when you do send out your reports to those providers, that the information in the system is valid.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think another area for practice management that we wanted to touch upon was the active users as well. Could you talk a little bit about why that's important and what people should be looking at?
Absolutely. Active users is very important. As a trainer, I've often gone into practices and we look at the active user list and they're like, oh, that person left, but they have open items and I don't know what to do with them. So it's important that you deactivate your users. And with that, when you start deactivating your users, if someone's no longer with you, you want to take a look at what items that they have open. Because when you deactivate them, MEDENT's automatically going to say, who do you want to assign these items to? And you can just pick someone and automatically transfers all the open triages, for example, or documents or labs or whatever else they may have. So before you go and deactivate your user, make sure you look at their open items so that you can determine whether or not you want to transfer them all to one user or if you want to parse them out to multiple users. That way, when somebody goes to send a triage, they're not looking at a list of people that are no longer here and have to remember, oh, that person's left, or this is the person I should send it to. So that's an important thing to make sure. Also, if your user is an administrator within MEDENT, you want to go into the security system, delete them as an administrator before you deactivate them as a user. But it's important to keep those users cleaned up and
Yeah.
deactivate them as soon as they leave.
And I think we are able to create non-employee users. Is that right?
Yes, that is a nice new feature that we have. So if you have an auditor that's coming in from an insurance company, you can make them a user ID. and mark them as a non-employee user. And you can actually assign them to a specific provider or a specific referring doctor or a specific insurance company. So that way the system will look at all three of those filters. And if that patient doesn't match anything on those three filters, that user will not be able to access that chart. So that is a real nice enhancement that we have, especially for those outside auditors that come into your system to look for charts and so forth.
Yeah, I think that was a really nice enhancement there. And of course, that ties into a lot of security settings. And that's, I think, next up on our list is going through your security system settings. Is that right?
That is correct. So you do want to look at your security settings at least once a year and see what your password rules are set. Just so you know, you can make requirements for your password rules, such as capitalization is required, numbers required, special character. You can set how many days until a password needs to be reset, or how many times a person can reuse a password. In addition, under our security settings, there is now an option to have a two-factor authentication when you're logging into MEDENT, meaning you use some apps such as Authy. You can require all of your staff or select staff members to use that two-factor authentication. They also can use Windows Hello if you give them permission. So it's using biometrics. So instead of having to type in a password, if they have their own Windows profile, that user, if they have security, you have to give them security, they can log into MEDENT automatically, either via a webcam or a fingerprint option through the Windows Hello features. So security system is important to review. Some, if you prefer, you can actually reset everyone's password all at once and say, you know what, it's April 1st and I want everyone to create a new password today, even though you may not be due to reset it for another 30 days, but we just want to have everyone reset their passwords today. That's another option that they can do. One last feature I did forget to mention with the password settings is there is a feature now in which you can allow your users to reset their own passwords. That way they don't have to go to an administrator within MEDENT. It does require some setups, and it requires a two-factor setup with an email and so forth, but there are instructions on how to do that if you're interested.
Yeah. And I know, two-step verification has really come up a lot, especially, with some of the cybersecurity incidents that have happened, this year. I think it's kind of shined a light on how helpful this two-factor authentication can be. So, it's certainly something I think that we would recommend. It's not a requirement, but, we do it here. We have the two-factor authentication set up for our employees and things, and I think it's just that extra step can really be helpful in keeping your practice secure.
Absolutely, very important.
And then you were talking about the ability to allow users to reset their password. And so, there are some password recovery areas that are also important to kind of clean up or set up for your practice. We have the ability to verify by phone number or email. So these are definitely things that you want to keep on your spring cleaning list for sure. I would say at least once a year, but that'll be based on practice preference.
Correct. I think that too, the having your users be able to reset their own password is a really nice new feature that we have. And like you said, once they verify their phone number and their email, they can do that themselves if they have security, and you can enable it for specific users or all users. So it's up to you on how you want to filter that down. So maybe you say, I want to do it for my doctors, but not for all staff. So you can have that choice.
Yeah, which is so nice to have that that customization, that little extra choice there. So I think that kind of covers the practice management side of things. And did you want to move on to the medical records and some of the items people should kind of keep in mind?
Sure, absolutely. When it comes to medical records, you want to look at a lot of open items. I feel it's important to just spot check users, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Sometimes people get overwhelmed what is open versus closed and the different statuses for orders and referrals, for example. With the orders, you want to make sure that your providers are looking at their incoming lab results and they're actually closing them out so that you don't have hundreds of open labs that haven't been resulted or that are resulted, but it doesn't appear that anyone's looked at them. Even if the provider may have looked at them, if it's not closed, it's very difficult to see other than looking in a log to see if anyone ever entered it. So it's important that you look at those items on a regular basis to make sure your staff is closing them and they understand the difference between open, received, complete, closed. You can set shortcuts on Message Central to track it for multiple users. You can set shortcuts on Chart Central through Chart Central buttons, and also through medical reports on the main menu. You can access your open orders and look at them for all orders ordered within a specific time frame that are in a specific status right now. So that's a nice way that you can take a look and make sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Referrals is another thing. You want to make sure that you go through your outgoing referrals on a regular basis to really make sure that closing the referral loop is happening. So again, you can set a shortcut on Message Central or on Chart Central, or from the main menu, you can run a referral report and say, show me all the referrals that were listed as a referring doctor, which would be your doctor, and then leave the refer to doctor open and see what the current statuses are for those referrals. Sometimes your staff may be forgetting to link the report into the referral and marking it closed. So therefore that report setting in the chart, but MEDENT doesn't know the loop is closed. So it's just important to really spot check those things on a regular basis to make sure your staff understands what they're doing and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. The same goes for documents. Documents the same way, Message Central, Chart Central, or you can go through the main menu under reports.
Great. Yeah. And it's so important to just kind of, like you said, clean up and make sure that you're not missing any open items and closing those things out on a regular basis. And then I think there's also some progress notes tracking that can come in handy.
Absolutely. So with progress notes, there's two things to really take a look out for your progress note. The first thing is, did your provider sign the note? And for that, we actually have a structured DM report automatically out there. I don't know if you've looked in that area lately, but from the main menu under your DMHM menu, you'll see structured DM reports. And these are reports that so many people have requested over the years. So we just created them as standard reports within the system. So you can go in there. And there is a report in there called Unsigned Progress Notes, where you just select whatever document code that your providers use for progress notes, choose the provider, choose the time frame, and it will show you how many notes have been unsigned. You can choose what status you want to look at, whether opened or closed, or you can just leave it as all statuses and just say, show me anything that hasn't been signed. So you can run that report on your own. Don't have to request it from support. It's already there for you. In addition, You can request a disease management report from support to say, show me all encounters that occurred. And you can choose what status, whether that's patient seen or closed or both, in which a progress note was never created. So it doesn't matter if it's signed or unsigned, it was never created. So you can request a disease management report so you can make sure there was a note started for every single patient that was seen. It also can be a manual process where you look at your feathers on Chart Central and go through each day's. But I think disease management reports really speed up that process for you. So it can just list all the patients that had an appointment and are missing a progress note.
Yeah. And then I think we were also going to discuss some triages and messages too, as far as open items.
Correct. And they're basically just like the orders and the referrals.
Yeah.
So you want to just make sure your staff is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Go into Message Central, create shortcuts, Chart Central, or you can go from the main menu. While we're talking about these items, we tend to focus on users. What's open for Karen? What's open for Megan? But a lot of practices also set up dummy users like front desk or nursing. So you also want to remember to look at open items for those dummy users to make sure that somebody has a button created to monitor those things for those dummy users. With staff turnover, sometimes it gets lost and you don't realize that triages are being sent to front desk, but your front desk staff doesn't have a button to track those items. So you also want to make sure, are there things being sent to that dummy user and are they being taken care of? So just really keep an eye on those things to make sure items don't fall through the cracks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I don't think I would have even thought of for the dummy users. So it's definitely easy to lose track of things. So I'm glad that we have you on today, because this is helpful for me too, to keep track of my own lists. But I know another area we wanted to touch on were the exception holding tanks. Could you talk a little bit about that area as well?
Sure. Some of the main exception holding tanks you'll have are your lab exception holding tanks. Those are all lab results that are coming into the system where MEDENT couldn't automatically attach that result to a specific chart. It could be that there's a duplicate chart, the name doesn't match, maybe it's not your patient at all, or sometimes it's because a lab's sending back a test result that we don't have built in the compendium within MEDENT. So you just want to monitor those on a regular basis to make sure that somebody in your office is physically looking at those. Otherwise, you're missing results. So that's very important information. It could be a critical lab result for a patient that a doctor's waiting for. So that's a very important holding tank to make sure that it's being monitored on a regular basis. Direct message, that is another holding tank. It's a direct message exception holding tank. And these are messages that are coming in from other providers. They could be pharmacies saying that the patient had their flu shot, or it could be a message coming from a specialist saying, here's the report from when they were seen in my office. But again, just like labs, we could not find that patient. Or maybe it's a duplicate. Maybe they spelled the name wrong. Maybe it's a new referral if you're a specialist. So primary care might be sending this patient to you. So if you don't keep track of these direct message exception holding tank, then you might be missing patients that are being referred to you. So it's very important you check on these exception holding tanks, make sure somebody's physically working them and they know how to work them correctly as far as parsing the information, recoding documents, and so forth.
Yeah, and I mean, I know this list sounds a little bit almost overwhelming, but it's this guide, I think, will definitely help folks kind of keep all of these things in mind. Karen did such a great job with this presentation that we're kind of repurposing. So I just want to mention again that the how for all of this stuff will be available in a separate guide that will walk people through this kind of spring cleaning list that Karen put together here. But Karen, I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, you're good. You're good, but that's good because it is a lot. It really is a lot to think. But I feel it's all important to make sure things are getting done. The Portal Central is another area. Portal Central is accessed through Chart Central, and this is where patients that need their patient portal reset, or maybe they're updating their demographics. So again, just making sure your staff is checking on those. And then the final is HL7 interfaces, where some of you may have an HL7 interface with a hospital to get your radiology reports or any other diagnostic study reports. So you just want to make sure that somebody's working those on a regular basis. So again, exception holding tanks, very important. Labs, everyone's usually really good with. HL7, everyone's pretty good with. It's the portal, central, and the direct messages. Those are the ones that I see people often forget to really stay on top of. So those are important things. And Megan will have detailed instructions on how to access those if you don't have that information already.
Yeah, and then I think there's just one more item on our list that we wanted to cover, which was the disease management formulas. Checking those for relevancy.
Well, before we jump into that,
Okay.
dovetailing off of our direct message and portal discussion, I did want to point out part of spring cleaning is to make sure you review your default users for those areas.
Yes. Okay.
And that is because frequently people will leave, or maybe they're no longer working with a specific provider, but that person might be getting those direct messages for that provider or those
Oh,
portal
sure.
messages for the providers. So you just want to periodically go into those message setup areas. There's two different setup areas, and make sure that the correct person is assigned if you're not using dummy users. This is an area where a lot of people use dummy users, so they don't have to go in and constantly make changes. But if you have it assigned to a specific person, you definitely want to go in there, check it on a regular basis to make sure the right people are attached to receive those messages. So
Yeah, and again, if people have any questions, if a practice is not using a dummy user and is interested in something like that, but you're not sure where to start or how to do it, you can always reach out to our support staff using our online support form at medent.com. Just click that support tab and complete the create a case form. And we can certainly have people reach out to help you set some of these things up and review until you guys are confident that you can do it on your own too. Man, we're lucky to have Karen, and a lot of our support staff is very well versed. But man, Karen is you're one of our best trainers here, and you make it sound so. I don't want to say simple, but you make it sound a little less scary, I think. So I'm glad we got you on today to talk about our list here.
That's my goal. Try to make you see, just break it down so you can keep track of it. It's not scary. You can get through it.
Yeah.
The last thing on the list, as you mentioned, was the disease management formulas. We create disease management formulas for you, and you want to just review those formulas on occasion. And this is another list that you can open up into an Excel spreadsheet. I'm not sure if you are aware, you can run your disease management formulas to an Excel spreadsheet so you can see a description of what that formula is for. And I've done this for a lot of clients. There may be formulas in there that you no longer need. Maybe you requested a formula to track something with specific dates from 5 years ago. Well, you don't use that formula, so get it deactivated. Don't clutter up your system. Maybe it's for tracking something for a provider that's no longer in your practice. So again, you can deactivate those formulas, and you can deactivate them yourself. You don't need to contact MEDENT support to do so. And Megan will have a tip sheet on how to do that posted. So, but that would be the last piece that I would strongly suggest that you make sure. That way, your staff isn't trying to select disease management formula to run and have to go through a full list, which half of the reports aren't even pertinent anymore. So I would say that's definitely an area to review on a regular basis.
Yeah, and we have a few weeks of spring left here, folks. So this is a good time to do it. You'll definitely want to make sure, I think, that you review these items at least on a yearly basis, maybe more. And it's not just to make sure you're not losing track of things, but it's also to make sure your system's running, efficiently and staying on top of your security and compliance and just overall effectiveness of MEDENT. So, hopefully you guys are reviewing most of these items on a regular basis. But if not, now is the time, a good time to start. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so Karen, did you have any other tips or tricks that we wanted to go over before we wrap this up here? I know that was kind of a lot of information, but I think we did a pretty good job of laying it out for people.
There's more detail you can go into, but I think those are the big key items that I would review on a regular basis. And you
Great.
can always contact MEDENT support for help, or review the MEDENT manual, or look at all the wonderful user guides that Megan has created that are on our website.
Thank you. Yes, and so everybody please stay tuned because this ebook will be coming out hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and I will be putting that on our website. And please, if you have not done so, subscribe to our e-newsletter because that is also how I am getting this information out there. When that ebook is ready, I will be sending an e-newsletter out with the link to view and download the ebook on spring cleaning. So hopefully folks will subscribe and stay tuned to their email inbox for that. And I think that kind of wraps things up today. Karen, thank you again so much for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.